Thank you so much, Karen, for taking the time to join us. And as most of you know, Karen is the executive counselor for District 2, representing 81 cities and towns, and very excited to see what you have for us tonight.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much, Jay. And hello, greetings to all of my friends in Sullivan County. It's nice to be with you. Nicer to be in person, but it's great to be with you by Zoom too. I do want to say, especially thank you so much to, there was quite a nice delegation of Sullivan County Democrats who came and stood with me at my press conference a couple of weeks ago in Concord. And I just want to say thank you so much. It really meant the world to me. Some of you know, maybe all of you know that as the only Democrat on the executive council, I am under attack quite regularly from the Republicans. They are trying to impeach me for some emails that I sent about voting rights, about a very bad bill from last year. The Attorney General did an investigation and cleared me of any wrongdoing, but that is not stopping some of the extremists in the House who are determined to just score political points any way they can. And so it can be a little lonely for me as the only Democrat in the executive branch. And so it just meant so much to me to have your support and to have the support of people. I know there were people who were there representing more people. And so I just want to say thank you to all of you for your support. I am going around the state in person and virtually talking about property taxes, because as we are now preparing for the election in November, I think that it is very important that we tell the truth about why our property taxes are so high in New Hampshire and who is to blame. The name of the game is accountability. And I am going to share my screen so that I can share these slides with you as well. So here we are. Why are property taxes so high in New Hampshire? And I will try and go quickly through this so that if there's some questions, we can address them. And if you put them in the chat, I'll try and keep up with them that way or get to them. And I have shared this presentation with Jay so that it can go out with your minutes or however, but you're welcome to have this presentation. So let's talk about why property taxes are so high, a little bit about the history and who's responsible. So first off, and I should just say for folks who don't know my background, prior to serving on the executive council for the past year, I was a city councilor for 20 years in Lebanon, just up the road. And the thing that I have heard the most about over the last 2 decades is that people in New Hampshire are being crushed by property taxes. And so this is how I believe, and somehow the Republicans who have been in charge of our state government for almost the entirety of our 250-year history, they have created this property tax crisis, and yet they have been blaming select boards, city councilors, school board members for high property taxes. It's not true. It's a lie. And we need to have the facts so that we can set them straight and hold them accountable. Republicans caused this mess. They cannot be trusted to fix it. So let's just all level set. First of all, keep in mind that in New Hampshire, we use property taxes to pay for about 2/3 of all government services. This is very different to the United States average, where about 30% of government services are paid for with property taxes. It's because we don't have an income tax, we don't have a general sales tax, and that means in New Hampshire, we're already starting with fewer options, and that means property taxes are doing most of the work in New Hampshire. Now, of your property tax bill, about 2/3 of that is going to the schools. And in New Hampshire, only 10% of that is being provided by the state. We are dead last in the country in terms of state support for public schools. And so that is already a big part of why our taxes are so high. Of the remainder, of a little less than a third is typically your municipal, police and fire, roads, and around 5% is county taxes. So why are these taxes so high? I want to go back a little ways. This is a tale as old as time. I don't think you'll be surprised. But towns actually used to have more tools than just the residential property tax. There used to be, well, I'll get into that in a minute, but over time, the state eliminated certain kinds of local taxes. They said they would replace it with revenue sharing. They said, we'll share some of these new state level taxes. And then over time, they ended revenue sharing. So local taxes were removed. The state promised support. Then they reduced the support. And so what happens? The property tax picks up the bill. And a lot of this goes back to 1970. So there was in the 1970s, right around 1970, there was a major tax reform movement in the state. Before 1970s, cities and towns were actually had more than just the residential property tax. We used to be a much more agrarian society. People didn't just live on their property, they also made money off of their property. They generated income from their property. And so cities and towns used to actually collect taxes on farming equipment, different kinds of farming equipment and inventory. They also had some, assets is spelt wrong, sorry. They also had taxes on livestock, for example. There was a tax on heads of livestock. And the state relied on really narrow taxes. They had the liquor tax. They had some gambling taxes. They had really narrow taxes. And in 1970, this major shift happened where they created, in recognition that we were less agrarian, less agricultural, and much more manufacturing, and that business was changing, the state decided to create the business profits tax. They removed the ability of cities and towns. They eliminated all these little local taxes and left just the property tax. But they said, cities and towns, we're taking those away, but we are going to give you a part of the business profits tax. We're going to give you 40% of what we collect in business profits tax. They also put in place the rooms and meals tax. So, we don't have a general sales tax, but when you go out to eat, you're going to pay 9% more. That's our rooms and meals tax. And they said, don't worry, we're going to give you 40%. We're going to share 40%. We're going to go to cities and towns. Well, carry on over time. In the 1970s, the next couple of decades, there was this pledge to avoid an income or a sales tax where very popular governor Mel Thompson teamed up, kind of colluded with Bill Loeb, the publisher of the Union Leader, and they put in place the pledge so that anyone running for state office would have to pledge that they would not put in place an income or a sales tax. And since that time, this pledge politics has really had a stranglehold on New Hampshire politics, especially on the Democratic Party. And we have not successfully been able to fight back against the pledge. Even Democrats who take the pledge are still accused of supporting an income tax. So take the pledge, don't take the pledge. Democrats have not figured out how to win. In the 90s, we had the Claremont decisions, and I know Sullivan County is ground zero in those Claremont decisions where the state Supreme Court decided that our Constitution does have a requirement that the state shall provide an adequate education for all New Hampshire children. And it's been 30 years and the state is still in contempt. The state legislature is still in contempt and not living up to that promise or to that obligation. And it's no surprise that we have had escalating property taxes ever since, continuously. So I've put the pressures on local budgets in three major areas, and I've got one slide for each. But rising costs, we all know this, it's intuitive, nothing gets cheaper over time. We all have aging infrastructure, and state and federal revenues are down. And what that does is just put more pressure, because local responsibilities don't just go away. You still have roads. We still have to have police and fire. and property taxes are the backstop. So some quick thoughts on rising costs. Special education is just one example here. It's about a quarter of all school budgets, and the state and feds, they provide only about 18% of special ed costs, which means that property taxes pick up the rest. And this has seen huge increase in costs even in just the last 6 years. So in 2017, special education costs averaged about $20,000 per IEP. Now they're around $30,000. That is huge. And that can mean a really big difference depending on the size of your district. You could have a family that might move in and maybe they have 2 kids that even might require, a residential facility, and that could end up being hundreds of thousands of dollars for a district. And the state and the feds are only providing less than a quarter of that, less than 20%. So huge escalation in costs and inflation, a dollar today can buy about half of what it could in 2000. So inflation is something that has really hit our budgets at the local level. Aging infrastructure is also a huge problem. In New Hampshire, almost all of our infrastructure is about 100 years old. And the New Hampshire way has been to kind of kick the can down the road and to defer maintenance, which of course in the end adds up. So we have school buildings that are in desperate need of updating and renovating, roads and bridges that are in significant states of decay and deteriorating. And water and wastewater systems. That's something I saw as a city councilor, especially. There's so much infrastructure we don't even see, and it is very, very costly. Decades of deferred maintenance is catching up with us and putting a lot of pressure on property taxes. And over the years, the story from the state has been the same. Those promises that the state made under Republican control, these were not Democratic promises, these were Republican promises that they made and then they fell back on. So it used to be that the state provided about 40% of the cost of construction for school buildings. Not all of them, but if you could get on the list. Now that's a lot of money because school buildings are very expensive. Now they put a moratorium in place on that in a tough budget year in 2010 and eliminated it for the next decade. In Claremont, I know that was especially devastating because the renovations lost by one vote. That was back, I think, in 2010 when it was the last time that they were possibly eligible for school building aid. That vote was lost by, I think, one vote or less than 5. And it meant that ultimately the Claremont taxpayers had to foot the entire bill for the renovations of Stevens High School themselves instead of having almost half of it covered by the state. That has had a serious impact on the tax rate in Claremont. Underfunding of rooms and meals. That was one of those taxes put in place back, I think, in 1967, but around the reform years. And when the state promised a 60-40 split, the highest that they ever did until just last year was 80-20. Over time, that has meant that cities and towns have not collected what the state had promised them to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. In fact, there's an estimate that it's about $500 million just in the last 15 years. Revenue sharing, this was the 60-40 split from the business profits tax, BPT. That also has been a loss of $400 million since 2010. The state said, we'll give you 40%. Then they said, well, tough budget year, it'll be more like 35. And ultimately last year, they actually eliminated revenue sharing completely. And the retirement system, we're not just talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, we're talking about billions of dollars. Back in the 1940s, when the state was creating the retirement system, it's always better, the bigger pool you have, the better. So they induced cities and towns and school districts. They said, if you will also join and have your employees, your public employees, join the retirement system, we will provide, we will cover 35% of the cost. These are for firefighters, police, and teachers. Well, over time, that 35% got cut down and cut down and cut down until in 2010, it was eliminated entirely. And that has meant, in just since 2010, that has meant over $2 billion, billion dollars that has had to get picked up by cities and towns because the state is refusing to pay their obligation. They did do, during COVID years, there was a little extra money. So they did give a one-time 7.5% contribution 2 years ago, I think it was. So the Republicans have been bragging about how, oh, we've given more money to cities and towns and school districts than ever. What do you have to complain about? Well, a few $1,000,000, $15 million is not that much when you consider that we're in the hole over $2 billion. And of course, over time, there's not been adjustments for inflation. So all of this adds up to more burden on property taxpayers. This might be the most important slide, I think, for us to all understand, because we need to combat the lies. The Republicans are trying to say, if you look at the last few years, we're giving more money than ever. What are you complaining about? The truth is, we have to look back. The picture, this crisis has been created over the last 50 years, if not more. And when you look at the last 50 years, property taxpayers are getting screwed, and there's no doubt about it. So here's a slide from the New Hampshire Fiscal Policy Institute. At the same time that all of these other things are happening, these pressures are happening on our property taxes, Republicans have also been deliberately reducing income to state government. So they reduced business taxes, and this is every year they're trying to reduce and ultimately eliminate business taxes. They eliminated the interest and dividends tax. They also last year removed the income cap for school vouchers. So they are deliberately decreasing state revenue, which means then there's less funds that are available for the things we talked about: special education, roads and bridges, environmental grants, the retirement contributions. And all of this means higher property taxes. Now, the business tax cuts, the interest and dividends tax, this is in the mindset of trickle-down economics, right? This has been kind of the mantra. Right now, it's in New Hampshire, it's the Americans for Prosperity, which it's in the same vein of Reaganomics that's been around. It doesn't work. In fact, there's a great op-ed today, or an article by Jean Martin in New Hampshire Bulletin that shows that actually, even though we reduced our business taxes, we actually had the slowest rate of growth among our businesses than the other New England states. So if we had our business taxes in place, we might have actually been able to gain ground. So that's it. So what does it all mean for us? Property taxes are regressive. That means that the people with the least ability to pay are actually paying the most proportionally. So for example, in New Hampshire, the poorest 20% of households are paying about 6% of their income to property taxes, while the wealthiest 1% are paying less than 2% of their income to property taxes. And COVID has really exacerbated this situation because the more affordable housing options have increased disproportionately. Think about it. A mobile home that was worth $150,000 before COVID is now worth about $300,000. Mobile homes have about doubled all across the state. So, 100% increase in value. Meanwhile, a $5 million home, those of you who live in Sunapee, some beautiful houses on the lake there, a $5 million home, that's gone up, but it's not worth $10 million now necessarily. It might be worth $6 or $7 million. So all properties have been increasing in value, but the properties that are at the lower end of the price point, they've been increasing disproportionately. And so that means that the people with the least ability to pay are actually getting crushed the most. So I think I have two slides to wrap it up here. But this is, to me, this is our main agenda as Democrats over this coming year. Accountability. Republicans created this property tax crisis. Now they're blaming select board members, city councilors, and school board members, the local officials that are actually trying to do their best with the very little resources they have. And Republicans simply cannot be trusted to fix the mess that they created. So this is, I think, what we need to focus on, a very important piece of our message as we prepare for November and we hold the Republicans accountable, because when we win in November, that's when we actually get to do what we want to do, which is to make life better for the people of New Hampshire. Democrats are the ones who are fighting for affordable housing and health care. We are the ones who believe in fairly funded public schools for all children, regardless of their zip code. We are the ones that are fighting for meaningful property tax relief. You know, my mother died when I was 6 years old. She died of cervical cancer, and my father was left with 3 kids under the age of 7. He had a small roofing business, and he was able to keep our family afloat thanks to the help of Social Security. And later on, as a young single college student, my daughter was born 10 weeks early. And I was able to go back to school and finish my studies thanks to the help of Medicaid that covered her 5-week stay in the neonatal intensive care unit. I know firsthand the power of government to improve people's lives. That's why I've dedicated my career to public service. It's why I wake up every day and feel so lucky that I get to continue working in public service to try and make life better for people. I believe that that's what we are all about. Republicans in New Hampshire today are about destroying government. They're not just about limiting it, they're about dismantling, defunding, and destroying government. But I know that there's a better way. Government can make people's lives better if we are the ones in charge. And so I hope I look forward to working with all of you. Sullivan County Democrats is a tremendous organization, and I know that each of your Democratic committees throughout Sullivan County are also really important. You have some real opportunities to win House seats and add so that we can hopefully have a majority in the State House in November, and start putting an end to some of the really bad things and the failures that the Republicans are doing, and especially this property tax crisis. So I look forward to working with all of you to hold them accountable over the next 279 days. And I think that we are going to do some great things together. And I really appreciate the work that you do, and especially your support for me, particularly when I'm under attack. This is my contact information. I know many of you have it, and I'm happy to hear from you as your executive counselor if there's ever anything I can do. Also, as you know, one of the leading Democrats in the state, I am very happy to hear from all of you. Find me on social media, Facebook and Instagram. And I also do have a newsletter that I send out about once a month. So if you'd like to be on my newsletter, please send me an email, and I will be happy to add you to my newsletter. So thank you so much for having me, and congratulations on having a great caucus. And yes, thank you, Sue, in the chat there. I see I'm going to be coming to Plainfield Democrats in person just before town meeting to talk a little bit more about this, and also to hear from some folks about some of the warrant articles in particular that are going to be on the agenda for town meeting in Plainfield. And I'm trying to go around to all of the Democratic committees in my district and around the state so that we can all get on the same page and have some of the same language to work with. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much, Karen. Wow, that was such a fabulous presentation. It's probably one of the best, most succinct ways of really getting to the core of things. So I really appreciate that. Do you have a few minutes to take questions from people?
Sure, I could take a couple questions.